Bitcrushers are not just for creating retro video game sounds. In fact, they can be incredibly useful in more subtle and musical ways too. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use Bitcrushers to add texture and depth to your mixes. And I'm using Avid's Lo-Fi plugin here, but you don't have to use the exact same one. There are a lot of different great Bitcrushers out there. First of all, let's take a look at how a plugin like this works. First, we have the bit depth control, of course, and it changes the actual bit resolution of the sound. So when you bring it down, you introduce a noise and crunchiness into the sound. And then we have the sample rate, which also affects the sound a lot. And the sample rate is almost like a filter too, because by lowering it, you're naturally rolling off all the high frequencies. So by playing with bit depth and sample rate together, you can get a lot of different tones and flavors. And then we have something called anti-aliasing, which is also a really important control and feature in any Bitcrusher, because this slider helps to smooth out the harsh edges that can happen when you reduce sample rate. Because by lowering the sample rate and bit depth, you can get a lot of unwanted artifacts and ghost frequencies added to the sound, especially in the higher frequencies in that region. So by moving this slider towards 100, you will reduce those artifacts and get a cleaner sound. But having said that, you don't always want a clean sound. Then of course you have additional controls too, like noise and distortion, and these all work together to give you different textures and flavors. So let's have a look at a few examples of what you can do with a Bitcrusher. And you can do a lot of things if you're creative and playful and want to experiment. And one thing I do a lot is using Bitcrushers on percussion, for example. You know, something like a shaker or a tambourine or any kind of percussive sound that sounds thin, but where you want more body or a darker sound. So here's an example. This shaker sounds good, but I want to give it a darker texture. So I'm starting by bringing down the bit depth to 8, and I'm adding some saturation to it and distortion as well. And as you can hear, is already sounding very different. And then you can even blend this with the original sound too, so that you get both the top end and the darker sound from the shaker. And the second thing I like doing with Bitcrushers sometimes is putting them on a Reverb Send. And that means you're leaving the original vocal normal and you're sending a bit-crushed version into the reverb only, so that the reverb becomes more weird and surreal sounding. But then, of course, you can go more extreme as well with Bitcrushers. And recently, I mixed a song for an artist called Ribbledogs, where I wanted the whole beat to sound crushed. So here's the beat without any bit crushing at all. And let's try to dial in that sort of extreme Nintendo Super Mario sound. I'm keeping the anti-aliasing slider down a lot to really welcome those artifacts and get a crunchy sound. And I'm keeping the bit depth at around 10 for this example, and once again I'm taking the sample rate down a lot. So as you can see, you can do a lot of cool things with a Bitcrusher. Sometimes they can actually bring a brand new sort of dimension into a mix, which is really useful and cool. And by the way, if you want to dive deeper into creative recording and mixing techniques, this will be my main theme in my upcoming workshop at Sonic Ranch in Texas in February. It's a 3-day deep dive into recording and mixing at one of the best studios in the world. There's only one ticket left, so grab your spot while you can. And along with the workshops, both accommodation and meals are included in the price.